Once you have population loss, that is a problem, okay? We were fortunate after Katrina where we had 100,000 people to return, but that has plateaued and now people are leaving. Because it's one thing to have that knowledge and to have that pride, but it's another thing to be in a position to actually make it mean something. All of this education in the city of New Orleans, all of this brain power, we have all of this intellectual capacity right here in the city of New Orleans. Young people already are almost programmed and pre-programmed to believe that they have to leave the city of New Orleans in order to have a better life, in order to have opportunity.
Royce Duplessis is a New Orleans native, state senator, and now a candidate for mayor, stepping into one of the city's most high-stakes races.
As it relates to the East and the Lower Ninth Ward, and it's important that we talk about them collectively because what's happened, hasn't happened east of the Industrial Canal is simply heartbreaking. But I'm gonna tell you the biggest problem that we deal with in the city of New Orleans. We are a beautiful city. We are a beautiful city, but I feel like right now we're at a similar juncture that we were 20 years ago, right after Katrina, where people are trying to decide. They're trying to decide whether or not they can afford to live here. They're trying to decide whether or not it's worth living here. This is a real moment we're in. While other cities are competing for businesses and other cities are competing for our residents in our cities. And I love the city of New Orleans and I love the people of this city. And I'm gonna fight for these people.
For starters, I guess we could just get right into it, man. Like, who is Royce Duplessis? Let's start there. Like, who are you, where you come from, and how do you end up where you are right now?
Well, look, I'm the son of Hetty and Wilfred Duplessis. I'm proud to be their son. I'm one of three or four. I'm the third of four boys raised right here in the heart of New Orleans. We were born and raised right in Gentilly Woods. Pontchartrain Park is we call that home. My mother, she was a postal service worker, worked her way up from the bottom. And my dad was a school teacher. He taught children with special needs for his whole career. So that's my upbringing, you know, New Orleans through and through. Attended St. Augustine High School, then went to Xavier University, and then had a number of different jobs throughout my life, but ultimately went on to Howard University where I earned my law degree. And being a New Orleans kid through and through, I had to come back home, you know, had to come back home, yeah. So, yeah, that's mostly my upbringing, but yeah, New Orleans is home, and yeah.
And we was talking off camera about the 35, because y'all went to back down to 35, and you were saying that you used to be around there a lot.
Yeah, so a lot of people thought I went to 35. And look, I'm a proud Purple Knight, proud graduate. In fact, this is my 25th year anniversary, and I'm looking forward to seeing everybody at homecoming. But I spent so much time at 35, people thought I went there, because my whole crew, all my friends, and my close cousin in life, so I would be at all the dances, Explosion, I'd go to after school. Yeah, so I had like the St. Aug 35 experience.
35 St. Aug, very prestigious institutions. And I kind of want to transition into kind of like core values, because one thing about St. Aug is they really know how to build up men. So let's talk a little bit about one, like St. Aug, your experience there, and how did it shape your core values that now impact you today?
Sure, well, for me, my core values have always been hard work, integrity, tradition, legacy. Those are the things, preserving the culture. So these are things that I cherish, and these are things that guide me. And in the political world, I see myself as a bridge from history, from the past, bringing us into the future. But it starts all about hard work and being true to oneself, being true to the community, and that's what shapes me. And that was instilled in me by my parents, as well as the institutions that you just mentioned.
Yeah, let's talk about the bridge. I want to double click on that real quick. So you, like the bridge from the old to the new, like what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so right around the corner, my grandparents lived on Laperouse Street, right between Tonty and Russia Blade. And this was pre-Katrina, this was decades ago. In the bottom of their home, it was a basement, but it was above ground. They actually had it was a polling station in their home, right? So these are things that I grew up watching. Now, they were not necessarily political, but they were very involved, if you will, right? My grandparents were not political in the least. I'm the first person in my family to get involved in politics, if you will. Some people might think I came from a political family, but I didn't. But my grandparents they had the polling location in their home. So when I talk about being the bridge from the past and the fact that we don't have as many polling locations as we used to and how that's impacted our community, these are the things I think about. These are the things that I carry with me as I try to be a leader in this community for the future. Because there's going to be changes inevitably, right? There's going to be things that happen and that impact our community, but it's that history of knowing how things used to be in our community that I can apply certain knowledge in the present in preparation for the future. And I just use that as an example and that's what I mean about being a bridge.
And that makes a lot of sense too. And we were also talking off camera about just the voting wards and like how things changed and how initially wards were meant for voting, which they still are, but a lot of, New Orleans has taken those up as more of an identity moniker of what do you actually represent and where's your identity. And I think another bridge would be, helping them get back to that. It's like, okay, you have what you represent, you have your identity. Now, how do you actually represent that, not just through, posting on Instagram?
Well, that's why I chose to get involved in public service, because it's one thing to have that knowledge and to have that pride, but it's another thing to be in a position to actually make it mean something, to be a bridge in that way where you're actually a resource for the community. So your ward, where you're from, you should be proud of that. Now, how do we represent it in a way where it has impact, where it has meaning, where it has value, and that you see an actual return on all that you've given to the culture, and you actually see some return on that. So I believe in that as well, and I believe I'm a bridge in that way in the position that I am in elected office. Because, it's one thing to be in a position, it's another thing to use your position to try to help move the community forward.
Yeah. And I guess to tap on a little bit more with that, this is the 20th anniversary of Katrina, right? So we kind of look at New Orleans as pre-Katrina, post-Katrina, so two different New Orleans. Tell me a little bit about your experiences before Katrina, what happened during Katrina, and kind of how that transitioned into what you're doing now.
Absolutely. Just the other night I was watching I started watching the National Geographic documentary that Ryan Coogler executive produced on the 20th anniversary. And it just stirred up so many memories and so many emotions about what that storm did to this community, to this city, to this nation. And reflecting on that in this moment, at that time, for me, I was in a lot of personal transition in my life. And while I was part of experiencing losses of all, my personal belongings, it actually was an anchor for me in my future in terms of where I am today. And what I mean by that is, in post-Katrina New Orleans, the first municipal election that we had in 2006, I was 23 years old at the time. I was intending on going to law school, but an opportunity came along. I was asked to volunteer on a campaign. It was the first election in post-Katrina New Orleans. This was around the time where, the whole, Chocolate City comments were made and all of that. So it was a very tense time for our city, obviously, because people were displaced. Right. And there was a lot of things going on where people felt like their right to vote was being taken away, that people didn't know if they were going to be able to return. And I made a decision to get involved in trying to help rebuild my community. And I was offered an opportunity to work on a campaign for a gentleman who was running for New Orleans City Council. His name's James Carter. And he actually just was elected National Bar Association president. So shout out to him. But after he won, he asked me to be his chief of staff. So we actually worked on trying to rebuild our city and do things in an innovative way. And that was my first real foray into public service / politics, which opened my eyes up to the importance of being in these spaces. Because unfortunately, politics isn't viewed very positively. People don't look at politicians in a positive way. People are often skeptical. And I saw then the need for good people to be in office. Yeah, and even at that time, it wasn't my desire to ever run, but I knew I wanted to be a part of the solutions and not just, just being on the sidelines, if you will.
Yeah. And that's a good segue into my next question, which is, when did you decide to run, and how do you think the public opinion perceives you running, which was right about a qualifying day, I think it was a day before or something like that, which is, so how do you feel about that? Was that strategic? Was that just something you decided to do?
Yeah. So I guess I'll start with saying my decision to first run for public office came after having a multitude of jobs in the public sector and outside the public sector. Like I served on the New Orleans City Planning Commission for several years. I worked at the Louisiana Supreme Court. I was a special counsel for Chief Justice Burnett Johnson, first black woman Chief Justice of the Louisiana Supreme Court. So I had a lot of work and a lot of experience. I was a private sector attorney and did a lot of different things. But I made the decision to first run for public office in 2018 for state representative. But the decision to run for mayor was a decision that I made after having decided back in January that I would not run. Okay. I said I would not run. But after listening to the community, after looking at what people were saying, people felt dissatisfied. People felt like they were being force-fed their choices. People felt like there should be an alternative, and I believe that. I think people deserve alternatives. I mean, people talk about how things aren't working right now in the city, and it's true. I mean, it's just a reality. So people deserve more options. So this was not in any way planned. I had a lot of work to do in Baton Rouge in my Senate job in Baton Rouge, so I was in legislative session. And upon coming out of legislative session, there was a clear desire from the community to have someone else in the race. And I talked to my wife, I talked with my family, and made the decision. So when people say I got in late, I say my response to that is, well, you know, if you're still concerned whether or not when there's a heavy rain, if it's going to flood, then I'm right on time, right? And I made the qualifying deadline. So from a political standpoint, people might think I got in late, but I'm going to tell you, in terms of the people in this city, we're right on time.
And I think that people really don't understand the amount of work that you put in on a state level. So I do want to talk a little bit about that more because, you know, homegrown from the city, a lot of us don't get opportunities to sit in these rooms to really see what's going on. And we know what type of state Louisiana could be. So how is it navigating things on the state level as being from somebody that's from here, that got family down here? Like, how does that impact you, and how do you work on helping us on a state level?
Sure. Well, I'm going to just say historically, Democratic cities, majority black cities, the cities like New Orleans, in red states like Louisiana have always had challenges at the state capitol, but New Orleans is not alone. You know, Jackson, Mississippi deals with it. Memphis, Tennessee deals with it. Dallas and Houston, all of these cities have challenges with the power struggle up at the state capitol. So you go up there as a black Democrat from the most liberal district in the state. So in my district, the current governor, Jeff Landry, got the fewest amount of votes in my Senate district. And his opponent, Sean Wilson, who he got the most votes in my district, right? So that's the district I get to represent, and I'm so proud to represent that district. But you look at my legislative record, I've taken on the hard issues. And I've taken on the hard issues in an incredibly hostile climate, a climate where we are in the super minority. And I've still been able to get things done. Now, look, there are a lot of bills that I bring that, you know, we can't get across the aisle or we can't get passed because the numbers just aren't there. And there are a lot of bills that we try to stop that we can't because the numbers aren't there. But we still show up every day and we fight and we hold them accountable. And that's what we're there to do. So I take a lot of pride in that. And I think that style of leadership we need more of that. Like, it's easy just to be opposed to somebody just because you're opposed to them. But we have to figure out a way to serve our constituents. So I've taken on a lot of heavy issues at the state capitol, and I'm proud of that. And you know, we've passed a lot of bills, and you know, we're gonna keep fighting, and that's just that's where we are. Yeah.
It's definitely a tough fight. I think I remember someone telling me that New Orleans is like a blueberry and tomato soup. You know, so it's like you got that one dot of blues, like a lot of red, you know, and a lot of people don't understand that things need to be negotiated. You need to be able to bring things to the negotiating table and know how to have conversations to get things done. Right. And I think that's really important with understanding how, you know, due process works and protocols and all of those things. So I do want to talk about the issues. So the first one that I talk about is education. And with education in New Orleans, we looked at it as like this experimental guinea pig type market where it's like you got the charter system, you don't know who owns what, where interests, who's responsible for different things. What is your stance on education? I know Louisiana is ranked pretty low in it. And how do you think, even though I know it's not directly the mayor's office to handle those things, how do you think you should get involved to aid in the education efforts?
Thank you for the question. You know, we're now 20 years into this experiment and where we are as a city. I believe the mayor has a critical role in helping education outcomes in the city of New Orleans. And the mayor has to show up and be a voice for trying to bring people together, but also ensuring that the services that are within the purview of the mayor's office are being properly funded and properly addressed. So you got to think about what these kids are dealing with day in and day out. Our children are showing up to school dealing with issues that make it hard for them to learn because of housing, because of violence that they may be experiencing or witnessing, because of a poor infrastructure, because of all these other elements that are impacting their ability to show up and thrive. So I think as mayor, I would have a responsibility to address those issues and be as supportive as I can to our local educators so that they can do their job. And we also know that there's issues that need to be resolved with respect to the lawsuit and the sales tax collection and resolving that. I will honor that and ensure that no funding is taken from our schools. That's just not going to work. We have to make sure our kids are already underfunded, so we have to certainly honor that. But I think doing the core components of being the mayor, our kids need mental health services. Our kids need all kinds of supports, and I think that there's a lot that the mayor can do, even though the schools are not directly within the purview of the office of mayor.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. There's also like the K through 12 and the university pipeline. Do you think there's any relationship opportunity there for like some of the universities? We have some pretty good universities down here. Any way for us to kind of connect those to the K-12 to kind of offer some better pipelines?
Several. I mean, we have an incredible hub of universities all across this city. And the brain drain that we have been experiencing is heartbreaking. And when we think about the connection that we could have from the K through 12 to our university system, which includes schools like Delgado, we talk about workforce training. We have to really lean into workforce development, in my opinion. I've been a big proponent of that. I've helped secure several $1 million of investment into the New Orleans Career Center, because we know that there are a lot of kids that may not want to go to a 4-year college or may not even want to go to a 2-year college, but kids that want to have opportunity upon graduating out of a high school, that they have opportunities, that they have a skill set in industries that already exist in the city of New Orleans. So being a convener is part of the job of mayor, and getting people in a room to rally around a shared vision of how we collaboratively work together with industry, with education, and that starts at the lowest level, kindergarten, early childhood education, and to develop them up into future opportunities.
Yeah, and to transition it into more of an economic development segue. So we're kind of done on education and to transition into the economic development, focusing more on the talent side to start with, because we, of course, want to train through education to be able to serve them to companies. So from an economic development perspective, where do you see New Orleans in that conversation? And if any, who do you see innovating within I would say in the state, as far as it comes to economic development, technology, and innovation?
Well, right now, I think that when you talk about innovation, I'm really impressed by a lot of work that's been happening on the ground with respect to community organizations that are leaning in on green infrastructure, because we are a city that obviously we have struggles with water being below sea level. I've been really impressed by a lot of the work that's happening on the ground with groups like WaterWise and Healthy Community Services, and the work that they've been doing to meet and rise to the challenge of climate change, and not waiting for government, and then leaning in and being innovative on ways that we can do hazard mitigation. So I think that's an area, again, that not only addresses environmental challenges, but also creates opportunity in an innovative way. But tying it back into economic development, I will be a champion for the port expansion. And while the port doesn't sound something that's really like connected often, or it's not a real sexy topic when you bring it up, the truth of the matter is the city of New Orleans was founded by the port. And I want to highlight that as someone who grew up in the city of New Orleans, you don't feel connected to it. You don't feel connected to the port, but there's so many opportunities, and we know that it's a $1 billion industry. And the reason that I'm harping on this port, and the reason that I'm going to be a champion for it, is because it presents the most opportunity right now to create new industry. Everything from transportation, logistics, packaging, manufacturing. There was a new Amazon plant distribution that just set up in Slidell. There's no reason that couldn't have gone in New Orleans East. Right. No reason, right? But the Port of New Orleans can be a great segue for new opportunity, but most people don't see it. It doesn't seem like a shiny new thing, right? Because it just seems antiquated, a little out of reach, but there's so much connectivity there if we lean into it and really create more opportunity. That's why I'm going to work with port leadership and business leadership to create more opportunities for people right here in the city of New Orleans. And I think New Orleans East can be a great opportunity for more innovation, but we don't see it right now. But as mayor, I'm going to be the person to champion it so people can understand the economic opportunities that exist right here in our own backyard.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people that are innovating in problems that you would see in our region. So it's like we got a lot of climate tech people. They're doing a lot of good work at Nexus, Louisiana. They got Idea Village that's doing a lot of good work to try to solve some of the problems that we face. So in New Orleans, we have a lot of hospitality problems. We got a lot of climate problems. Things that could be innovated around, and then we can go in and bring those to different markets. Kind of like when they brought in the robot bartenders in Vegas. They rolled those out in Vegas first because if they can work here, then they can work everywhere. So it's like looking at opportunities like that. No candidate has brought up the ports. Yeah. That's very interesting.
Yeah, I think because it's not a sexy topic, but I'm telling you, it can be our bread and butter. And as our leader, we have to lean into our strengths, right? It's easy to go chase all these new things, but if we have to play up our strengths with what we have right here. And if we do that well, that will attract new investment.
Yeah. How do we keep some talent down here? We know a lot of them go when hurricanes hit. They'll go, move to Texas or something like that, see how it is out there, probably stay out. What is your thoughts on how do we retain and probably even get some talent back down here? So
everybody knows we are suffering brain drain. We got to reverse that and turn it into brain gain. And once you have population loss, that is a problem. Yeah. Okay, we were fortunate after Katrina where we had 100,000 people to return, but that has plateaued and now people are leaving. And unfortunately, the narrative is such that in spite of having all of this education in the city of New Orleans, all of this brain power, we have all of this intellectual capacity right here in the city of New Orleans, young people already are almost programmed and pre-programmed to believe that they have to leave the city of New Orleans in order to have a better life, in order to have opportunities. So we have to reprogram our young people starting earlier, but it won't happen unless we attract new jobs to this economy. Look at the bottom line is this. People work hard, go get educated so they can go make a good living for themselves and for their family. So young people, they don't leave because they hate New Orleans. They leave because they want better opportunity. And right now, those opportunities aren't plentiful enough. So I will be laser focused on attracting new jobs to this economy, attracting new jobs to this region. And I'm gonna take a regional approach, right? Because look, I mentioned Slidell. That's St. Tammany Parish, right across the water. Right. We got to work with Jefferson Parish. We got to work with St. Tammany. We got to work with St. Bernard because people can live in the city of New Orleans and still drive to work and out of place. We got to get outside of the old way of thinking and think regionally, right? That's what it's going to take to be competitive. And I think that's just what we have to embrace because when people move to other cities, they might live in one county and work in another county, right? So it's not just because they moved to Houston that they actually living and working in Harris County, but they have more regional opportunities in these bigger cities that have embraced economic development. So that's how we have to think about it. And young people are only leaving because of the limited job opportunities that are here after they graduate.
Yeah, it's definitely something worth noting because people do leave for different opportunities when I look at Louisiana and New Orleans, like we're ranked pretty low on a lot of the most rankings. And I think of that as more of an opportunity. Right. It's more of a way for you to get access to talking to a lot of the people in higher ups, taking meetings with people who really want to answer your call. Like I wouldn't be able to do a podcast for New York mayors, candidates. They wouldn't even take a meeting with me, right? So being down here where you have more access and more reach and it's more homegrown, right. It's just way more authentic. Right. So to the infrastructure point, which we're transitioning into now, yes. I'm asking everyone, right? The potholes. It's like, how do we handle this pothole situation? What's your thoughts on that? As far as from an infrastructure perspective, and then we will get into some other infrastructure projects.
Yeah, so after Hurricane Katrina, the prior administrations negotiated $2 billion a surge of cash into the city of New Orleans that we're still trying to spend. A lot of I think about half of the money has been spent, but not all of it has been spent. I've heard a lot of reasons as to why that is, going in between project managers to the lack of capacity that we have in-house at City Hall and what's most efficient. There's been a lot of money spent just on pure project management. $30–40 million just burned through, and we haven't gotten any results as a result of that. So then a new administration comes in, and they're sort of going back and forth. I've heard from people who are in the industry and who work at the city that a lot of it has to do with federal regulations. A lot of the FEMA money can cause a lot of challenges with being able to adequately go out there and do the projects. But I'm gonna tell you the biggest problem that we deal with in the city of New Orleans. It's a lack of coordination between Sewage and Water Board, Public Works, and the other agencies, Entergy, Cox, these people who have to go in and cut streets. I talked about how I worked at City Hall 20 years ago. Nothing was worse than when a constituent calls about a pothole in the street and you're trying to get it fixed, and you go up to Public Works to try to get it fixed, and they tell you, all right, that's not our issue, that's Sewage and Water Board. Then you go to Sewage and Water Board and say, Public Works just told me it's your problem. They say, that's not our problem, it's Public Works' problem. So we have an issue in terms of people just working in silos, and our inability to streamline and make these processes more transparent and efficient has been the biggest issue, in my opinion. It's not due to our inability to fix streets. You know, we have engineers and people who know how to fix streets. It's the lack of coordination and constant communication that I think we're lacking in terms of getting it done effectively.
All right, so I'm gonna dial back to the innovation, because I didn't talk about AI. And since you're talking about efficiency in government and communication silos, I wanna talk about the whole AI craze. Because an example would be where we put out an ad that we wanted to run social media for companies in New Orleans. And at first I had a guy who I was paying some money to do that, to respond to the emails. First week we got around 200 leads. He talked to like 9 of them, right? So after that, 2 months went by, got tired of paying him. I wound up getting AI to answer the emails. No email goes unanswered, you know, and it's way cheaper than what that would have been. So what are your thoughts on technology being in government? I've heard some jokes of people saying that New Orleans is built on like Windows HP or something, or XP. So like, what's your thoughts on efficiency, technology, and AI, and how it relates to government?
Whether we want to accept it or not, it's here, so we have to embrace it. I mean, we just simply have to. You know, we got to take City Hall into 2035 and get out of 1995, right? I mean, that's how it feels. I mean, it's just the truth. So it's really getting us out of our old habits and old ways of doing things. You know, AI, the word itself, right, or the phrase or the idea, I think is scary to a lot of people. Sometimes it's scary to me when you think about it. You know, you got to go back to what was the movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger, The Terminator? You know, it's like they were telling us this back in the 80s. You know, it's like, you know, and so you know, it's scary when you think about it, but the reality is it's here. So let's embrace it and let's use it in a way that's going to benefit us, because if we don't, we're going to continue to get left behind. Yeah. So I will be a mayor that is focused on not just collaboration but innovation. And I know that there are other cities out there that are leaning into it, and I think we can do it in a smart way, where I talked about those silos. We can break down a lot of those silos by investing in new programs and new systems around innovation, and that will likely include AI.
Yeah, and that's a big infrastructure conversation, because we talk a lot about physical infrastructure and streets, but what about the digital infrastructure that allows for the communication pipelines to be strengthened so that we can get more physical stuff done? They were also talking about like the 911 and being able to respond to calls, and just, you know, just helping scale support, because we live in a city with 500,000 people. You're not going to be able to talk to everybody.
Hey, look, at one point, I talked about my mom. She worked for the post office. They used to use the Pony Express. And at some point, you know, there was a horseman sitting there somewhere. It's like, wait, what you mean we gonna change? Get off? We gotta change it up. You gotta switch it up. Gotta switch it up.
Yeah. A lot of people get scared about jobs, but when the Industrial Revolution happened, there was a lot of people on farms. About 30 people on farms, and they got replaced with 3 people on the tractor. But those 27 people, they went to the factory. because that was the birth of the Industrial Revolution. So now we're moving out of that Industrial Revolution to where like our education model is based off of the Industrial Revolution, like our work model, and these things are now needing to be adjusted to fit the information age.
Yeah, and I don't always look at it as a loss of jobs. It's just people are going to be working in different types of capacities, working actually doing the programming, doing other aspects of maintaining those systems. But you know, we don't have to use paper for everything. You know, there's other ways we can operate and serve our constituents who are also customers. You know, when people come to City Hall, they need to feel like they're a customer. They need to feel like they're not a burden to the people who are that are, you know, to do their job. Right?
Yeah, and infrastructure-wise, let's talk a little bit about underrepresented communities, because New Orleans is one of the few cities where the majority populace is underrepresented. So let's talk about the East. Let's talk about like the 9 across the canal. Like, what are some infrastructure projects that haven't been prioritized that need to be prioritized just to give people regular standards of living?
So as it relates to the East and the Lower Ninth Ward, and it's important that we talk about them collectively, because what's happened, hasn't happened east of the Industrial Canal is simply heartbreaking. As someone who grew up here, who remembers what the East used to look like, whose family lived in the Lower Ninth Ward, you know, having those connections, seeing what it used to be, the amount of pride we have for that part of town, and the lack of investment we've seen, particularly post-Katrina, is just unacceptable. So I think we have to first focus on blight reduction, I believe, you know, in terms of those areas, and start with addressing, like just giving it a level of pride. Yeah. Blight reduction really matters, I think, in those areas. You know, outside of that, the infrastructure challenges that are faced in those areas are shared across the city of New Orleans. But I think that if we can get New Orleans East the investment it needs, the Lower Ninth Ward the investment that it deserves, the rest of the city is going to benefit from it. So for so long, it's been the other way around, where we say we invest in these areas and then it'll trickle out to New Orleans East in the Lower Ninth Ward. I think it's the opposite. We need to invest in New Orleans East and the Lower Ninth Ward, and the rest of the city will benefit as a result. Yeah. And that involves basics like street lighting. That means basics like street repair. And that means basics like sewage and water board properly functioning. And we get those things right, the city will benefit from it.
Yeah, and streets, grocery stores, like just, you know, basic necessities, I feel like would just enhance the quality of life for so many people, and you know, the places where people really don't feel like they have a voice. And
these are tax-paying citizens who carry a huge base of our city's budget, who are paying taxes and deserve their services and deserve quality services.
Yeah, the whole notion that New Orleans is mostly, you know, black, and a lot of our neighborhoods are kind of underrepresented. It's just something it's the age-old issue within New Orleans. It's just majority black city, but it seems, even like the Ryan Coogler documentary on the National Geographic, it just shows that we constantly don't have a voice. Yeah. And my question to you is, how do we get these people in these demographics to know that you do have a voice? Yeah. Because it's the reason why a lot of them not going to the polls. There's a reason why a lot of people, because they don't feel like it even matters. Right. So what are some things that you would do from an advocacy perspective, because that's where we're segueing into, right, to let them know that they do have a voice?
Yeah, well, a lot of people try to divide us and go down this pathway of talking about race and all these other things. But I do, to your point about representation, it's important to have representation, right? Because when people, black New Orleanians or whatever, if you are a minority, it's important that you see someone who looks like you and that shares your values, your experiences. That is something that I learned. We went through this redistricting process trying to get a second black congressional district, right? So that people have an opportunity to choose someone who shares their values. And that's really what this is about. Because when voters don't feel like there's anyone who understands them or shares their values, their experiences in life, they're probably not going to be inspired to go out and vote for that person, yeah, right? Which is another reason I was compelled to get involved in public service, because people are so just disaffected and they feel like there's nobody there that really cares. So I do think it is a factor, and it should it matters. And I think that, look, this is not a problem that's unique to New Orleans. We've seen it across the country, especially during this Trump administration, where they're trying to roll back progress and roll back efforts around diversity, equity, and inclusion to say that people who are in certain positions, they're only there because they're black. We got to fight back against that kind of stuff. It's just, that's the climate that we're in. So the progress that was made, the Voting Rights Act that gave people the opportunity to choose someone that shares their values and looks like them, or at least has their experiences, all of that's being chipped away at, and all of that's trying to be reversed. And we have to be mindful of that in these times. And that applies at every level of government. That's even happening in the corporate sector, where they're rolling back all of the programs around diversity, equity, and inclusion. So yes, we have to be competent, but yes, representation does matter, especially in a majority black city. So yeah.
And when it comes to your position, you sat at the state level. How does that experience prepare you for something on the city level? Like, why are you the best based on the experience that you've had talking and negotiating and trying to advocate on a state level for us?
Yeah, well, I started talking to you about how I got started. So my work in this in the public sector started 20 years ago at the city level. At the city level. So I've worked at the city level. I've worked at the state level. I've even worked at the federal level, and I've been in the judiciary. I've been in the legislature. I think having that perspective of having worked at the legislature will be particularly helpful in this moment, because as hostile as that relationship can be between the city and the state, you also still have to work to get things done and try to deliver resources for the city. So I think that'll be particularly helpful. And look, the issues that matter right now are largely around quality of life and creating economic opportunities for our people. And that's what I'll be laser focused on. And I think that right now what we've seen a lot at City Hall is a lot of chaos, a lot of division, a lot of really nothing happening but people fighting all day. And I think people are tired of that. That's certainly what I hear out in the community. And look, I'm not saying we're not going to disagree. We're going to disagree. But there's a way in which we can go about disagreeing. It doesn't require us to just be opposed to one another just because. And we need to turn the page on that and bring New Orleans to where it needs to be, which is not where we are right now. So I think that New Orleans is ready and deserves someone who hasn't been a part of a lot of that chaos and division, and somebody who's ready to turn the page on that and bring us together.
Definitely. It's been, the last 8 years have been crazy. It seems like headlines.
It just doesn't make sense. I mean, it's turned into, it's like a reality show. Every day somebody's doing this and that. And it's amazing how, I say I go into the Lions Den in Baton Rouge and work with people who I disagree with all the time. But as a result, folks try to attack me and say that I'm part of some other scheme or whatever it is. And I'm saying, wow, wait a second.
I want to talk about that really real quick, because it's like, I don't know when being able to negotiate and communicate with another entity has become a problem. That's the point. You want someone that's diplomatic, someone that can advocate, and somebody that's respected, because a lot of people, they wouldn't even take the meeting with them.
Yeah, I just think it's a reflection of the times that we're in. People have different agendas and they work their agendas. And, if you're not part of the agenda, then they'll say anything, even if it's not based in truth, right? So, if you can say that, you can't say, because I can sit down and talk to anybody and try to work with them, but I don't compromise my values on issues. And it seems like we've gotten away from that, where people they're afraid to even take a picture with somebody out of fear of, if I take a picture with this person in some kind of way, then, I belong to them. And, that's a real unfortunate reality. I think that has been a result of where we are with the internet. But look, that type of stuff doesn't distract me. I'm focused on serving, and I'm focused on doing what I have to do. And my constituents know what I'm about. And it's an honor to serve this community, and that's what I'm going to do. Being an elected official these days is not necessarily an easy job, but I feel very fortunate to be able to serve my community, and I would be so honored to be able to serve as mayor, even though it's one of the most challenging jobs in the country. think it can be very rewarding because you can have a lot of impact. So yeah, I think we need to try to tone the temperature. We need to lower the temperature a little bit and cut out some of the bickering and move beyond this stage of divisiveness because people are tired. And all of the fighting doesn't do anything to serve people at the end of the day.
Yeah, yeah. From a policy perspective, this is my last question, by the way. Yeah. From a policy perspective, from a theme of your campaign, what do you want people to take from you running in this election? If you can remember one thing from your whole campaign, what would it be?
That you don't have to settle. We can do better. We can be better as a city. You don't have to settle, and we don't have to settle. That's why I'm in this race, because I refuse to settle. You know, I learned early on that nothing happens from the sidelines. You know, James Baldwin said that not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it's faced. So I believe in getting in the game. You know, I believe in trying to be about bringing about solutions. And I'm open to sitting and working with anybody to do that, right? If that's what it's going to be. And look, I can be convinced otherwise, but I want the people of this city to know that we can do better and we don't have to settle for the status quo. We can turn this city around, bring it to where it needs to be. We can reverse the brain drain and turn it into brain gain. We are a beautiful city. We are a beautiful city, but I feel like right now we're at a similar juncture that we were 20 years ago, right after Katrina, where people are trying to decide. They're trying to decide whether or not they can afford to live here. They're trying to decide whether or not it's worth living here. A lot of people chose to leave. A lot of people didn't have a choice and were forced to leave. You know, so this is a real moment we're in. While other cities are competing for businesses and other cities are competing for our residents in our cities. And I love the city of New Orleans and I love the people of this city. And I'm going to fight for these people. I'm going to fight for our people.